That's okay. Flag the flag of the United States. And to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Barcombe?
Here.
Mrs. Boyce?
Here.
Mrs. Giroux?
Here.
Mr. Gladding? Mrs. Gonial-Horn?
Here.
Mr. Harriman?
Here.
Mrs. Barat?
Here.
Mr. Mulaney?
Here.
Mr. Marin?
Here.
Mr. McCabe?
Here.
Mr. Murdoch?
Here.
Mr. Sanders? Here. Mrs. Stillings?
Here.
Mr. St. Clair?
Here.
Mr. Thurber?
Here.
We have 14 board members present.
We need to have an executive session, need a motion. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sure. Dave, could you please?
Sure. Thank you, President St. Pierre, for our executive session. I'd like to request it on the basis of a matter of discussion regarding proposed pending or current litigation, a matter of collective negotiations pursuant to civil service law, 14, the Taylor law, a matter of financial, medical, or credit or employment history of the persons. Thank you. Thanks. Laney, we're able to grab a right.
We have a nice conversation.
You've got a lot of things to talk about.
For our guest attendees, we are just transitioning from executive session to regular session. We're letting some of our cabinet team staff in. We'll probably be starting up in a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
See you later.
Sure. So you've got a captive audience.
Perfect.
Nice. Do you need anything, or are you okay to walk? And you need water or anything, or you?
On the internet as well. Candidate assistant superintendent.
How's it going, Scott?
Taking some.
I know. It's supposed to get over 30 there today. Oh, yeah? Great. A lot of things could be better.
My business is.
Wow. Yeah. Things are looking positive, but we're not. You know, they talk about all these variants that could come down and make a mess of things.
South Carolina, North Carolina this weekend. We took a day, just. How's the medical world? Check out the beach. Nobody's on the stage. I wanted to go home. One restaurant puts on a pure. You were going to almost.
No.
That's it.
Introduce yourself.
Slider, CVES.
Carrie Calvert Gray, CVS.
Eric Bell, CVES.
Michelle Freeman, CVES.
Okay, thank you all for being here. Our next process is to do our annual meeting. Call that meeting to order. We don't need to do a roll call.
Not again.
Okay, so it's time to elect a chairperson for the meeting. Someone to nominate.
I nominate Mr. Maron.
Need a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed and carried. Okay, then you're up, Ed.
All right. First time I've done this. I have to go through this thing here. We need to do opinions, concerns from the audience, or just start the annual meeting? Okay. Great.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay, so, thank you. I'm going to stand up and I may try to present from here. I know Mr. Bell. Are you going to pull the information up?
He will share screen.
Okay. So, actually, I will just present and you can hear me. Maybe it will be better if I just sit and present. That way, everybody can see. Okay. So with that said, I would want to thank our cabinet team. I know Mr. Bell, Mrs. Myers really helped with the yeoman's work on our budget piece, our budget PowerPoint, as well as our cabinet. We have given you an extensive overview of our, and I have Mr. St. Pierre, do I have the clicker? Okay, so I'm good. So you do have our 21-22 budget presentation. Thank you again for all being here. It is part of our BOCES annual meeting, and it is required by statute that we do present this information. At this point, for all of your districts and for our members who are component board members, as a confirmation, the budget as is being presented tonight is considered tentative. That is under statute, under Education Law 1950, and it is considered tentative even when the component districts vote on it next Thursday. So tonight you're not being asked to approve it, but we will put in the actual number of the budget amount that's being recommended. So our board clerk will include that information. It will be important that our total budget, not only our administrative budget, but our total budget is included in the minutes. But you're not going to be voting on it like you would normally in a component district where you approve the budget before it goes to the voters. The board's actual approval will come next month if our administrative budget is approved. You would then actually vote on the approved budget to make it, on the tentative budget to make it final. And if not, then you would, under state law, if it's not approved by a majority of our components, you would then need to adopt a contingency budget. Okay, just to clarify the normal process, because it is a little different than our component districts. Okay, so we'll just move through this. You have seen a majority of this presentation, so we will not spend a lot of time. If there are any questions, I can see our board members as well as our members here. I would like just to acknowledge that and say, please pause or just let me know if you have questions. The actual agenda, you can see the budget calendar, the budget development factors, and then the draft budget proposal. This is similar to what you received back in February. Again, acknowledgement and thanks for our budget committee members. This is a year-long process. There's not a lot of kudos that come with being a budget committee member to get into the details. But we do want to thank all of our budget committee members for their participation and their hard work in supporting this as well as the meetings. I'd like to also acknowledge our the cabinet members who put a lot of time and energy into working with their accountants as well as the entire budget process as we put together a very good, what we believe is a fair budget, and one that's cost effective but still supports our programs as we go forward.
Questions?
You'll notice on our budget calendar, we are at we're nearing the end of the budget calendar. The highlighted area is our annual board meeting and then the component districts vote. That's next Thursday on the 22nd. Following that, our districts would then notify us of their participation in the shared services and the board approval of our budget or the contingency budget at that point. When we look at the budget development factors, we've talked about these before. We know that there's been significant changes with the approved budget and stimulus monies, but you can see the different highlighted areas, and we'll just touch upon those, as well as our singing management services staff who helped come and serenade Mrs. Jackstad as she was on one of her last days. For our budget development factors, you'll notice, and as a reminder, for New York State, it's unique. Again, it's 2% or the CPI, whichever is less. Only state in the country that has that. Our growth factor is actually 1.23%. That's the CPI. Many of our districts do have a rollover amount, or they have an additional higher amount. And it's hard for our components to share because in some cases it's higher than 2%. We had one superintendent to say that their approved tax cap rate is 6%. And they said because of all the rollover and the other aspects of the implications, so there's no way they would go out with that, but that's what they could go to and still meet the tax cap rate. The health insurance premiums, again, Mr. Bell, our board of directors, our union reps, our labor reps, everyone, we did have a overall successful year with our health insurance consortium. We put considerable money into reserves, and the rates that we came up with basically, and I know Mr. Bell is 0% primary, Medicare primary, 1.5% for individual family plans at plan one, and on average, 3.15% for Medicare primary and plan two, and the individual family plan. So overall, much less than the 10 or 20% in some cases that we were moving forward with. Again, salary increases and negotiations are part of the annual increases, and we have been moving with our labor union agreements to having retirees contribute more health insurance in retirement for their rates. You can see for our fringe benefit rates, both TRS, the Teachers Retirement System, and ERS, a slight increases in both cases. Overall, our WADA has decreased. That's the resident weighted average, daily average. Attendance average has decreased overall across our full BOCES by 96, with just under 14,000 students. And then for the next, and this is the major area that we'll just mention, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Bell. And that is, I think everyone is aware that the New York State budget has been approved. It was approved last Wednesday night, about midnight. With that said, there's a significant amount of stimulus monies that has come in to New York State. We know that we've all been facing a really unparalleled time with the pandemic. The governor did put forth a proposal and say that New York State needed at least $6 billion to meet a minimum. He said, if not, we need 15 billion to really help us keep moving forward. With that being said, that was over the next couple of years. In truth, New York State received more than was asked. For the next 2 years, we're scheduled to receive approximately $23.5 billion. So with that said, the state has moved forward. You'll notice, the funding structure that you're seeing is going to be quite changed compared with what we were thinking about in February. The overall New York State budget for year 2022 is $212 billion. That's the total overall New York State budget, and it's 10%. It's a 10% increase over last year. You'll notice now this is the approved budget. This is for education. It's $3.1 billion of an increase. That is for the education increase. And with that said, foundation aid is going up $1.4 billion. Now that's a 7.6% increase, and you'll also notice over on the right side, the final budget commits to phase in of the foundation aid to meet the campaign for fiscal equity standards set by the courts. It was a court case probably almost a decade ago where they said that education in New York State, there's a minimum basic standard. Many of our districts haven't met it based on what the court believes is equitable. And there is a commitment by our legislature. They were required by the courts to implement that. They never have. The plan at this point, and it's been very clear, is the legislature did approve phasing in that foundation. So that $1.4 billion that's coming in foundation aid is scheduled to come for the next 3 years. Similar increases for 22, 23, and 24, which would then bring us to the Campaign for Physical Equity standards. You'll also notice the federal stimulus monies. We talked about $12 billion, $12.5 billion, $3.85 billion in the federal coronavirus relief and supplemental appropriations. You see it as CRRSA, and then $8.2 billion in ARPA, which is the American Reserve Plan Act, funding to schools. That's a lot of money that's coming into the state. It's significant amounts. And some of the proposals, you see the foundation aid is restored. There was plans for a cut and freezing it with a minimum increase of 2% over 2021. We talked about the phase-in of the foundation aid. And you'll also notice, and many of you may have seen from your superintendents, and I'm just holding up the state aid runs and so when you look at the state aid runs for your districts, and if I will send this out to the board if you'd like to look at it, on the bottom of your state aid run, there is a CRRSA and an ARP line. Many of our districts, all of your districts except one, and Mr. St. Only Keene is not receiving much money, and it's based on actual Title I appropriations. So Mr. McCabe, I was having discussions today with your superintendent about that and some advocacy. There are a number of districts around the state that don't receive a lot of, and it's based upon Title I funding, and that's how the money was allocated. You know, in many cases, I know Peru, Beekman, we're talking millions of dollars. All of our districts, it's millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars for our smaller districts. Significant amount of money, and only one district in our region is not slated to receive much money at all. Okay, Mr. McCabe, it's actually about 15,000. So I know your superintendent and I were discussing today some advocacy with our legislators, as well as acknowledging that as well. FEH BOCES has one or two districts in a similar boat. They have a lot of value in land, but there's a threshold that they have to meet, and it's not being included. But we can talk about that in a little more detail. Okay. For the increase of the foundation aid, you can see there are certain areas that every district will be required, and even Keene does get a foundation aid increase as well. So all of them are receiving foundation aid increases. They are going to have to put together plans to state to be able to justify the receipt of this money. And you can see some of the highlights: increase graduation rates, close the achievement gap, reduce class size, help at-risk students, address the social emotional health of students as well, and then help, with assistance of students with disabilities, English language learners, and homeless students. So these are priority areas that have been identified by the state and by the feds in terms of that accompany that stimulus monies and the foundation aid. A couple of the other items we talked about, the expense-based aid that the governor wanted to freeze, that has all been restored to the tune of $443 million of an increase. So you can see that's a major amount of money the governor cannot control. In total, $9.2 billion. That's a lot of money. Transportation aid during remote learning, meals, and internet access is considered allowable. You also see the STAR payments, which was scheduled to be taken out of education money, has been restored. You also see community set aside and also universal pre-K. Districts are encouraged across the state to really implement universal pre-K. And it is really strongly encouraged because they will receive funding for it as they go forward. So these are primarily the major areas of the budget. It's as you know, a 10% increase for New York State's budget is huge. There's additional income taxes too that will be raised to the tune of several $1 billion. There's different aspects as well, and we will forward that summary on. And I know the Hinman-Straub update that we included does have a lot of details, and we'll be happy to spend more time on it if you'd like. But for brevity's sake tonight, we'll turn over the presentation to Mr. Bell now. Unless there's any questions, I'll pause and just see if there's any questions from our board members or anyone online. Okay, so Mr. Bell, I'll turn it over to you. Do you want the clicker, Mr. Bell?
Almost having to use the keyboard. Thank you, Dr. Davey. for that update. I'm going to run through 15 slides rather quickly because you've seen most of them before. Our change was, as Dr. Davey just talked about, was the state budget, but also the health insurance piece. We previously budgeted 4% individual and family, 2% Medicare primary. Those results Dr. Davey shared with you. The big change there is Plan 1 came in at 0% Medicare primary and 1.5% individual and family. That affects our retirees. We don't have a single active in Plan 1 at CVES, so that really affects our admin budget and our retiree health insurance. So I'll cover that in more detail at the end. I'll go through these rather quickly. If you have questions, feel free to jump in. I'm happy to explain more. Special education budgets, where we're going to start. 205, 208, 210, 220 are our classrooms. We've got 26 classrooms. So that's where our tuition rates are set in our budget. Our biggest decrease on the slide here, budget to budget, as we look at it, is our one-to-one aids. That's really because of the IEPs calling for less aids for students, one-to-one aids. Those are ongoing, right? Those meetings are happening right now with our CSE chairs. So it's to be determined. That could come up. We don't know. But at this time, we're budgeting where we're at for current levels. Overall budget decrease of just over 1% in our special education division. Highlighting one of our programs, looking at our 208 COSER, we do have 11 classrooms between Plattsburgh and Mineville. There was a reduction, so from our current budget, so our budget we created for the current year that we're living in, we budgeted 82.5 students. We had a reduction in number of students that were attending for multiple reasons. So Director Slattery working with Dr. Davey, we did not fill one of our vacant positions and reduced one of our classes. So we're building that in our budget next year. We like to highlight, and we met with the CSE chairs, we meet with the superintendents and the business officials. We like to highlight, we typically have open seats in our classrooms. So we're budgeting for 75 students. We have vacant seats. If we can get more than 75 students in this program, that will help flow to surplus and go back to our districts. Next is our instructional services, COSERs. The big decrease you're going to see here is our Final 6 COSER, and that's really the bill as use services being down. So you see a large reduction in budget. I'm going to highlight the 554 interscholastic coordination COSER on 2 slides, so I'm going to reserve comment on that. Looking at the other half of our instructional services COSERs, here I want to point out an instructional technology COSER. It's the second one down from the top. We have a $7,500 flat fee currently per district. It's been received very well by our districts. We have high interest in this COSER, so we're making a decision to keep that flat. We want to encourage participation. We think it's a great COSER per district. We think it's great for the North Country, so we are keeping that flat from year to year. Overall budget in ISC you can see is going down minus 6.56%. Now, highlighting our interscholastic sports coordination, why we highlight it is because there was a change in our methodology for charging rate. So we previously charged a per district fee and an R water rate. When you think athletics, really what we service is the modified JV and varsity. Our water takes into account your younger kids too, elementary and so on and so forth. They got brought up to us. We said, yeah, let's look into it. We surveyed BOCES across the state. When I say we, Terry and Dr. Davey led that charge with Mr. Longtuck. Surveyed BOCES, said, what are you doing? We presented it to all 26 superintendents of what we found, what our results were. Let them all know because Section 7 is not just our BOCES. And then our BOCES superintendents, just our component districts, did vote on changing that methodology unanimously. And that changed to a per sport fee. We got rid of our water for per sport fee and a per district fee. Next is CTE Enrollment Averaging. We're looking at year 3. Next year, we're living in year 2. It's been great. It really helps with planning and budgeting and being fiscally responsible, but also preparing high quality educational environment for our students because Director Freeman and our team knows what the budget is as we go in. When you know your operating revenue, we can make fantastic things happen above and beyond what we already previously did. So it's been a great success. I will tell you, it was hard to get it. A lot of legwork happened to make it a reality. Our districts are loving it now. I will tell you, we've heard nothing but positive feedback from our superintendents. And I'm showing you some numbers there. Our enrollment is up in CV-TEC. We're living in a pandemic. A lot of barriers to education in CV-TEC happened because of the pandemic. And our enrollment is up 590 students in this current year. our enrollment average for the current year is 576 students. Next year, our enrollment average stays pretty much flat. That 590 is replacing a 589 that is falling off from 5 years ago. So the average is actually staying flat about 576. So as we build this budget, we are looking at it with pretty much flat enrollment because of the enrollment average. Division applied engineering will be in year 2 of 3, where it runs outside the formula. After year 3, that enrollment goes into the enrollment average for each district if they had students in the program over the course of the 3 years. Look at the budget here. Where I want to highlight is the overall total. So we have a 1.79% increase in budget, not budget, but revenue coming in from districts. And when we look at it as a tuition per student, which is how we historically did it, we're going from 12,100 to 12,306. So very limited increase, and that's with almost a zero increase in number of students. Our increase in number of students was 0.5. So really, we did it by limiting our change in our budget to the best of our abilities. Pre-CTE program had a reduced enrollment this year, so we did have a decrease in the budget. We reallocated some staff to support the programming in our CV-TEC 101, 102, 103 COSERs because there was increased enrollment, so that's why you see the larger deduct there. Again, we'll monitor what our enrollment looks like next year once we do get those numbers from our district. Look at management services COSERs. Our health insurance coordination COSER 602 has a 26% increase. This is year 2 of fully rolling in that COSER. We made a 2-year plan. We started in January of this current year to run a half year. We built half the budget into this current year budget, and then next year we're building the other half. That came in well below what projections were based on the actual dollars involved in that COSER. Labor relations, we've started. We're working on rejuvenating a COSER in labor relations, and you can see the tier fee there. This is where you'll see some of the change. So we held our non-retiree health insurance portion of our admin budget flat, and then our admin portion with retiree health insurance, you can see is increasing 4.89%. When we previously presented this, we were looking at over 6% increase on that line, and we've reduced it by 1.4% or $84,000. So that health insurance difference equates to real dollars that our districts will see in that savings of $84,000. Capital budget being held flat, and I do give more details on each of these. The important piece here, this is what districts will be voting on. So districts vote on our admin budget. If it gets voted down, our budget will go up. I want to make that very clear that this is below contingency level is what we're proposing. Oops. We might have the wrong slide here. Make sure my update is on there. We have the old presentation here. So the only difference here is the overall totals there are off. It says 380. It should be 295 on my printout here. And the board, I believe, has a printout of this in front of them. So for our guests in the audience, I do apologize that you don't have the printout. Holding our capital budget flat, this impacts the tax cap. So therefore, we are saying there is no impact on the district's tax cap because we're holding this flat. Again, Dr. David mentioned the ROI, give an overall summary. And really to touch on our budget in the current year is just over 41 million. The one we're actually proposing is 40.8 million, just so everybody's aware. But just over 41 million is our current budget. BOCES aid that was paid to school districts in this current year, 12.5 million. Surplus we sent back to districts in the fall, 1.6 million. So the net share cost of our BOCES services in this current year is 26.9 million to our districts, or 43.8%. So very proud, and that's of our aidable COSER. You got to realize not all of our COSERs are aidable when we look at our budget. If you look at our special education budget, over $13 million budget, not aidable. It's run through excess cost aid, high cost aid, not through BOCES aid. So really powerful information there that it's a great reward to our districts, and we're sharing that again with you.
Did all of the school districts get an increase in the aid ratio?
Did all of them?
Because it looks like
not all of them.
A lot of them got a big increase.
Not all of them got an increase. Obviously, a 36% did not, but that's the base. But a majority of them did. Yes.
And sounds like any of the concerns that we had last year on the shared athletic process thing, that sounds like kind of addressed it and everybody was pretty happy with the approach to resolving this.
Not everybody, but
Look, it hurts some of the districts. They see that it's fair. So it's been accepted, I guess, would be a good way to put it, because they see it's a more fair process of starting out the coach.
Yeah, that's not what the concern before. Some people getting a great benefit because it allowed them to get a lot more value. It seems a lot more fair.
Questions?
Thanks for separating out the admin budget with and without the carry. I think that makes a lot of clarity with the vote.
Right, and several other points, we will make sure that the budget presentation is distributed tomorrow to all of our components. That way they have a copy of it. We also have the budget talking points, so they can have that. And we will also distribute a nominee sheet. We will talk about that in my superintendent's update, which is a summary of our bios for our board members who are running for our BOCES election. Okay, so any final questions from anyone? Okay. Thank you.
Report card is nice.
Okay. So, well, we'll make sure that we have the right presentation put on the web.
And the printout's good.
Okay, good. All right, for our ninth ballot, just as a reminder for the second part of our annual meeting, the BOCES report card is something that's by law needs to be available and distributed. We do actually download a copy of our official BOCES report card to state ed. So that is something, and we also have to have a link for state ed so people can access it. With that saying, for our board meeting again is tonight, the 14th of April. As we move forward, just as a reminder, and I want to thank our communications department for helping us, update our slides and so on and so forth with our mission, our vision, and our core beliefs. If you're familiar, you see them throughout our organization as well. And we always do start our presentations with an acknowledgement of the goals of our organization and what we work towards achieving, especially for all of our students. With our campuses, there is an updated presentation too. It looks like the older one was loaded, because I do have a slide presentation that has a picture of our WAF campus with grass instead of snow. So this is like our older one was presented.
What are you talking about? That was last week.
Yeah, that. So with that said, that was the earlier slide. So the one that was loaded in our SharePoint is actually has the one with grass there. You will see for our overall agenda, just an overview of the instructional services, special education, and CV-TEC highlights. So we'll move forward. There are a couple of overview slides, which I do just want to share, and just an acknowledgement. Now, this is for the 1920 year. So remember, a year ago, at this time, we were approximately a month into our COVID shutdown. So if you remember, in January, February, we knew things were coming, but we weren't sure how it was going to roll out. In March, actually about the 15th of March, the 12th to the 15th, we shut down. We had a meeting, we went virtual and didn't come back to campus. So we did have several highlights that ended up happening even as this whole COVID crisis and pandemic unfolded. One, you can see our construction actually rolled out. It was absolutely amazing. Mr. Bell, our team, our contractors, our schoolhouse construction and Tetra Tech, our internal team worked diligently, even as the pandemic was hitting. We did a lot of prep work. We worked through the Army Corps of Engineers. We made it, we progressed through wetlands. We actually received SED approval. I mean, the amount of work from the board's approval of the previous year and the vote to put the plans in place, to getting SED approval to the bids. Our construction actually became a reality even during a pandemic, which has been amazing. And we had very good success rates with our contractors implementing safety procedures. as we move through our end of year, especially our strategic plan survey was implemented during a time when no one was on campus. We did have our actual highest rate of participation ever. It was around 260 people out of 330 full-time employees, so it was amazing. And we had a lot of positive trends that were reported. We still had areas that we continue to grow on. Those were acknowledged this year as well. But again, and currently we are now administering our 8th annual survey. So that's actually out and in the virtual airwaves now. Lastly, there were some areas too, just to highlight as well. You can see the lower picture. That's actually Region Oderkirk in the middle in the white jacket. You see next to her, Dr. Leslie Myers, who was a state ed assistant commissioner. She's now the Rochester City Superintendent of Schools. And then Mr. Brielle and Tom Burns, as well as myself. So Mr. Brielle was the new DS for FEA BOCES, and Tom Burns is the DS for St. Lawrence Lewis BOCES. That was taken at a real meeting and in person in Malone, and it was a Regions Forum. It was quite a night.
I remember it dearly.
And very memorable.
Dearly.
Yes, dearly. Including, just so you know, the joke on that, including hitting a deer on the way home by Mr. Slattery's first night. So with that said, it was dearly a memorable night. But again, we partnered on the graduation measures. We also hosted a rural schools forum and so on and so forth. So lots of things were happening on the positive, and we were continuing, and then we were faced with the pandemic. You did see, it was unparalleled. You've heard a lot of analogies and terms about it, but not something that we've ever experienced. With that said, not only did we move forward with going remote, and literally one day to another, but we also worked with our school superintendents, the local hospital, our local health officials, the counties, and we really worked together, not only on the closure, but also how we would respond and keep people safe. You can see we worked on our remote implementation as well, and really we transformed how we deliver education and did it remotely. Our staff was amazing. Our administrators were phenomenal. Our health staff did a great job. So everyone stepped up and really moved forward successfully to make this happen. Across the region and even statewide resources were contributed. We assisted the county health departments with streaming and live press conferences. And we also assisted in serving and preparing student meals and instructional materials. There were some days, as we went back and looked at some of the research, there were days that over 11,000 meals were distributed in one day by our component districts, all working together. So literally hundreds of thousands of meals were distributed to students, so that we could keep our families fed and also our students. It really was an amazing time to think of how that all came together, and we closed out the year. We had virtual graduations. Our staff did a great job. Our leaders did a great job. The virtual celebrations were amazing. I think of both CV-TEC and special ed, they were absolutely phenomenal. So we came up with new ways of doing things, and really I'm so proud as we think back about the year and what we accomplished. It really was an amazing time, and we've been fortunate to move forward since that time. So I'm going to now turn it over to Ms. Calabrese Gray for our Instructional Services Center.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Okay, so the photo, just real quick, from left to right on left, that was when we did have the emergency closure due to COVID. So we actually were trying to get ahead of the game and create an online resource. So we founded, an online learning resource where people could go and get some quick things and just at least give some resources, and people were frantically looking for things. So that was well received. We even got a tweet from SEB, which was nice. Youth Empowerment Center, we did hold in the fall, so that was good. We actually held our spelling bee, which was mid-March, right when we were going to be shutting down. Actually, I think the first week in March. And then also we have a photo of Dr. Davey, who did many Clinton County Health Department, what do we call those? I don't know, press releases, where the media, where they all came from, those different entities, and gave updates to the region. So the communications department was helping out the county to get that, to make that happen. So next piece is our PD And there, you can read those. Those are typical things that we did above and beyond. I do want to give a shout out to the Stanford program and for Amanda Dulo, who really, I was sort of speeding on lots of stuff, but they were making it look good. So they did a great job with setting up some webinars, tapping into a lot of the expertise of our teachers, both in the special ed division and CV-TEC division. They had some great participation in those offerings, so it was nice to see. And people from all over were attending, so it was nice that even, it wasn't even just from our region. So they did a great job with that. So this chart actually looks better than we thought based on emergency closure. Next year is going to not look as well just because of having the, not having the ability to have the in-person events that we typically hold. So, but anyway, not bad overall considering what was happening. So those were our offerings, and there was a number of offerings, and then the participants we had. So you can see, like in March, when we had some of those webinars, there were like 100, 200 people on. So that was great, but again, it was just getting us up and running and people who were looking for things. Interscholastic sports coordination under Matt Wallentuck's leadership. New this year was the assigning of sports officials. Typically, they used to, each sport would have their own assigner, which was more or less a nightmare because, you had to figure out who does which sport and, who am I supposed to contact. And they work on getting the officials. We weren't sure about athletics this year, but we were happy to see that we were able to get athletics in for students. So that was great. And Randy Lozier was able to be brought on to help us with that. And he has been a godsend trying to coordinate that. So, and again, just reading through those, you can read again about things that we've been doing there. Communications department continues to work hard trying to get the message out, whether it be our component districts or at CVES. So you'll see the various things that they do. But yes, they were very busy with virtual events, right? Celebrations. It was just like we saw bunting and stuff all over the place, right? For several months. So that was great. And also going to your school districts for your graduations and trying to stream those and get more people involved. So great for them. Shelley Manchester, who is our grant procurement administrator, she's been doing an outstanding job. You see the districts that participate in this service. She's getting very nervous when she heard the additional dollars that districts are getting and receiving because she's like, I don't know how much more I could do. Like 7 million already she helps oversee. And every time you change something, she has to get that approved through SVD. So she's just like, oh my God, if that almost doubles, I'm going to need some help. So we're going to look at that and hopefully we'll be able to, with some other districts, talk about maximizing their dollars because really she knows how to do it. The people who are in it praise her up and down, and she's very successful at getting and acquiring grants and then reallocating money and figuring out other ways to like use your general fund money to maximize your grant money. So, so she's very helpful with our districts and getting that done. So that's her chart. Here are the things that she did, so you can just get an idea of all the things that she helps assist with. But again, she has a great relationship with our districts, and I think they're, really appreciative of the work that she's doing for them. Jeff Sisson with Health Safety Risk Management, that put him on his head this year, right? He was just full throttle. Well, actually, last year was full throttle once March hit, but we were watching it since January, right? We knew something was going on, and then February, then March, and then it really started ramping up. So he's been living it night and day, so that's good, but he still has to do the building safety inspection. So he was in schools all the month of December, pretty much some of January. When there was no vaccine and he's going all over. We were like, Jeff, stay home. Like, if you don't need to be here, we'd rather have you home because he was from, Spring Lake all the way up to North Beach and Clinton. So, and every day was a different school. So, so that was good. We did get the mask for districts and acquired that through volume purchasing and the help of management services to get that done. So I would say kudos to everybody there and our team and our reopening team and all the people who helped with that to make it successful this year for our students. Instructional planning for assessment last year, Amanda Zula was in that position. And again, just outlining the things that she was able to do and then really taking on a new role once the emergency closure happened. School library systems, again, Suzanne Ford Krogan and the different offerings that she's had and people that she brought in. And all the work that she does behind the scenes, and she also gets very involved in library services across New York State. So, so kudos to her. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague. Mr. Slattery, and I saw you in the mail.
Good evening, everyone. So we know how last year ended. And as a result of that, federal government waived all annual testing requirements at the end of the year. So I have far less data to share with you because our kids didn't take, they didn't say, oh, the assessment, they didn't take 3 through 8 tested, nor do they take Regents exams at the end of the year. But the data I want to focus on is just as important, if not more important. So with that, we have enrollment trends, and you can see over the past 3 years, enrollment's been pretty consistent. I think this represents the 2% fluctuation from 17-18 to 19-20. And the thing to note here is a shift in distribution. So 611, that's a more intensive programming that we provide to the region. We saw an increase in enrollment with that. Our 811 programs, we saw a slight decrease in enrollment. That's directly due to component districts being able to provide that programming in-house. And if they have a student population to do that, they absolutely should, because that is what is best for those students to be educated in that least restrictive environment in their home district. This slide is really where I want to spend the most time. As a service provider, special ed division for the region, we specialize in educating students with disabilities that are really in that moderate to intense need. So last year we saw 11 of our students graduate programming. That's inclusive of both campuses, Mango and Plattsburgh. 4 of those 11 graduated with a Regents diploma. Extremely proud of that. One of those 4 students had that CTE endorsement, and that was out of our Mineville campus. So I'm extremely proud of him and our students for making it through. If you're wondering, did those students benefit from not having Regents exams administered at the end of the year? Absolutely, some of them did, as did all students within New York State. So anyone that experiences test performance or anxiety, that would leave. They didn't have to take that test. If they passed the course, they received Regents credit. So really proud of our students for that accomplishment. We had 1 student receive the CVES credential, Career Development and Occupational Studies. That is a concentration of preparation and skill building for post-school employment. There's a couple, really 2 avenues to do that. And in the special ed department, our pathway includes about 216 hours. That's a requirement of study, and 54 of those hours can be in a work-based experience. So we'd like to see that number continue to increase over the years. It's definitely going to be a focus of the division. And then the final column on my left, that skills and achievement commencement credential, that's only for students with a disability that's designated as highly intense disability. So students with extreme high needs that do not, they're eligible for the alternate assessment. They can receive the skills and achievement credential. It's important to us to know where those students go after they leave CVES. So out of the 6 students that graduated last year, 1 entered supportive employment, and that's out of our Essex County area. 1 transitioned to our adult services out of our Plattsburgh campus, partners in transition. 2 of the 6 students are returning to CVES so that they can work towards that CVES credential. Everyone here knows that students with a disability in New York State, you can attend school up until the age of 21. New York State Education Department just released a memo yesterday encouraging districts to extend that age to age 22. I was in a meeting yesterday. Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. They're encouraging it, but it's not a requirement. And that's a direct impact of the pandemic and being able to serve those students that need it most. Now, the second half of my slides, less data. It's more about this year and giving kudos to our staff. We're over 200 members strong in the special ed department. Our staff has done an excellent job. They're essential employees in being able to provide in-person services to all of our students. Mineville hasn't missed a day yet of in-person service. Plattsburgh, we had that shift for 3 weeks, 15 days. Outstanding job to everyone. Success through the pandemic, we have, Dr. Davey mentioned at the beginning, having that technology infrastructure in place, so that when we did shifts, that shift was seamless, where students were able to access education, and all of our students, not just a few, during that remote period. And then having it creative. Mrs. Gray outlined a bunch of things that ISC did and had to do. And we're continuing to look at ways, to be creative through the face of the pandemic, whether it's professional development opportunities or communicating with our partners. Part of that communication piece has been a big driver this year. We want to improve our communications of our programs and services with our component districts, with the families and communities we serve, and our partnering agencies. Right here, we have 5 brand new brochures. We've been able to collaborate with the communications department. These aren't finalized yet. We have 2 remaining that should be complete in the next week. When those are done, I'll send those to Dr. Davey, and he can share them with the board. We're excited to be able to highlight and capture our programs so that our audience knows, what we do and how we do it. They can be proud of the services that they're going to receive. Final slide. I think everyone here has seen these things. First one is the speed sheet from the special ed department that was updated recently. This should create that guide for our component districts. And then on the far right, our Bitmoji open house from the fall. Trying to come up with creative solutions during the pandemic so we can bring families into our world without doing it physically. Up next, my colleague, Director Friedman.
Thank you.
Can I ask 2 questions real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, first one was on the enrollment slide that you had from 3 different years. Right? So those are actual numbers of students, what is that for?
Yes.
Right? But that doesn't take into account fluctuations of growth for people coming into the region or that kind of. What about in the transition from 801, 601, is any of that associated with students going from smaller school districts to bigger school districts that are able to accommodate some of these things?
Yeah, great question, Ed. So that data is from a standard point, a consistent point for the past 3 years, right? So that's bed stay, so that's taken in October for comparative reasons. But to answer your question, yes and no. It's not tracked. If a child leaves, say, Keene, which is really small, enrolls in Beekmantown. Beekmantown has an in-house 811 program, but we're served from our Mineville campus. Then it's in-house. We exit, the child will receive the request, but we're not tracking them, he or she after they exit. There is a trend across the state that we're just talking about earlier today, where more intensive programming is needed. It's needed to be provided by BOCES. So typically the North Country trends come here a little later. But you can kind of see that shift where those 611s, that's becoming a higher need, whether it's to support students with mental health or specific disabilities. And component districts that are larger, that have that larger population, they are able to create, 811s. That's a really good example for in-house programming. So we want to work with our component districts to kind of know and identify those trends so that we can continue to provide the services that are needed. And those needs are going to shift.
And the other question was the 21-year versus 22-year-old age recommendation. Who decides that age?
Can you say that one more time?
Who decides the age of 21 versus 22?
Yeah, each component district, it was the state ed representative that was on my meeting today was asked point blank, hey, we're going to bring this information back to our component districts. Will high cost aid be associated with students that attend that extra year? She had a very political answer saying, that hasn't been decided yet.
Okay.
Which to me means I don't think it's going to happen because they're not mandating.
So the representative,
Yeah.
but not funded.
Yes.
Thank
But
you.
that's my answer.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 1920 data for the CV-TEC division. As Dr. Davey had mentioned before, we started off the year very naive and thinking it was just going to be like any other year. And little did we know what we were sprinting towards. Right? So you have the PowerPoint in front of you with the slides, and the slides are the slides that we generate every year based on the data that we have of our cohorts of graduating CTE students. I'm going to share them with you, but what I want to point out tonight, the numbers are good. The numbers are really good. But the story behind these slides is extraordinary. What happened during the course of last year was absolutely extraordinary. In my 30 years of work, I have never done harder, more important work than what was done last year and up to this day today. As we move through this pandemic and we trust each other's professional judgment and taking new initiatives and taking risks, I have never been prouder of the work that was done by the CV-TEC team, and particularly the leadership team of Jim McCartney, Dr. Grace Stay, Adam Facto, and Kathy Snow. It was absolutely extraordinary. So as you look at these numbers, keep in mind they're good, but the story behind them is truly extraordinary. So you'll notice that students achieving a 75% or greater, we use 75% not because we want a C+. It's because this is the number that we are obligated to submit when we do our CTED's annual reports. So these are the measures and the metrics that were asked. So again, at the close of the year, despite over a marking period of CTE without shops, CTE without supplies, CTE without equipment, we still maintained a 96% success rate with our students. Our national assessment is based on our CTE New York State Program of Study, which includes the 3-part technical assessment, which is a written part, which is usually a NACD, or a precision national assessment based on the training area, the performance assessment based in the same, and the exit portfolio. Due to the COVID crisis, the assessments, both performance, because we could not be in the shops to actually do the performance, and the written was waived, and guidance was put forth as to how we could assess students on their ability to perform at a proficient or exemplary level based on the competencies of the program of study. So there is no data on the written for this past school year. Our students who graduated of our 300 and 300 plus, which incidentally are CV-TEC selective high school cohort, is larger than any high school cohort in our BOCES sending school districts. And so it's really a testament to the work that's done on those 3 campuses to maintain that 97% graduation rate. Now the CTE endorsement is on the equivalent of the region's advanced designation, which does score a 2.0 in correlation with an IB or an AP capture on the home district report card. In order to achieve an endorsement, the students must successfully complete a 2-year program of study that's been audited and approved by the State Education Department, as well as completing their 3-part technical assessment. I've explained to you that that was not necessarily the case. And so guidance had to be put in place as to how we would measure whether or not students were eligible for that advanced designation. The criteria that was used for 1920 was all of the criteria with the exception of the written and the performance assessment of the 3-part assessment, but the students must have had demonstrated an 85% competency rate or higher. Students, though, who had taken a licensure exam, such as CNA, game of logging, any of those that had already taken and passed them, they were eligible for the endorsement with successful completion, which in our case is 65 or higher, of the 2-year program of study with the successful capture of a licensure, New York State or national. So as you can see, we had 160 of our students with an advanced designation last school year. These are just some highlights of the programming: 23 CTE approved programs, 677 participants in those programs, 616 high school students, which is relatively 31% of the available 11th and 12th graders of our 15 sending school districts. That's just the same number in a pretty slide. So of our graduation, or our 98% are students who have graduated and moved on, 53 are going into employment, and 45 are going on to post-secondary education. In addition, as always, in our 411 coaster, we have the opportunity for online high school credit recovery, different components. This played a big factor this year with the pandemic and trying to navigate all the needs of students and keeping them on track. This is just an ongoing list of some of those offerings that we oversaw. Principal McCartney oversees all of these online high school courses and the enrollment, the grading, and the credit procurement for our districts. Our adult literacy, our 4th campus of CTE, was also very successful despite the closure. As you can see on the slides, we had several students participate through literacy, high school equivalency, and through SNAP. And our adult education programming was, oh my gosh, we were on target for some record years, but then we had to close our campuses. So we were able, prior to the closure, to have some CNA evening programs run, ground school ran, phlebotomy ran, and actually was in progress. We had to stop it in the middle of week 2 of their 8-week program. And AIM was not able to go, and our women in manufacturing was not able to go because of the closure. So before I close, I think it's really imperative to note that these data that you're seeing from the CV-TEC division and the Career and Technical Education division of CVES is very respectable and very, very good. But again, I go back to the extraordinary story of how we were able to maintain, sustain, and excel. And I guarantee you, when this is presented by your director of CTE next year, that the data on this screen will be even more extraordinary because of the work that's occurring right now, the way the team works together, the way everyone paddles in the same direction and embraces and practices the core beliefs of CVES.
I have a question about some of these students that couldn't do workshops. Is there anything in a pipeline for them to do that again or get it done? Down the road?
Some of the folks have requested a refund, which would have been issued, and others are waiting for us to reopen so that they can talk back in. So we have that ready to go as soon as we have the green light to onboard those additional classes onto our campuses.
Is there anything for, let's say there's some seniors that could come back next year to finish a course that they didn't get a chance to do well in because they didn't have workshops?
I will tell you that with our returning students, we did have 3 students from welding last year that we did onboard back when we opened in the fall. And we had them here for a full market period to make sure that they felt, we felt, their parents felt, their home districts felt that they were good to go.
Oh, good. So that's wonderful.
Thank you.
The ground school students, did they go through and get their FAA test after ground school class?
I'm not sure. I know that there's no flight that goes on, you know that,
Yeah.
right? This is just the mandatory FAA part of the ground school. Where they are in their process, I'm unsure, but we can check with Mr. McCartney.
And then the chart showed high school students was about 616 enrolled, right? And the regions CTE, we call it
The endorsement?
endorsement, right? It was about 160.
Right, but there, 616 is juniors and seniors. We graduated 330, so of the 330, 160 received the endorsement.
And what causes that difference between getting the endorsement and not getting it?
Well, the endorsement, like an advanced designation for regents in math, science, foreign language, is an honors level. So the CTE endorsement is an honors level marker. So yes, we had 330 graduates, 160 of them performed at or above the honors level.
And Mr. Mayor, just as a final compliment to our team, thank you to our presenters. Excellent job. And again, for highlighting many of the most important things, as well as, and I know, Mr. Bell, you were not included in that because of management services, but we do want to recognize not only our leadership team, but our administrators and all the staff. As the last slide shared, you know, everyone's support of CVES and our mission, both as cost-effective but high-quality services to our students, to our communities, to our component school districts was essential. And during the past year, it was one of the most demanding and stressful times that any of us have ever experienced. Not only did we rise to the occasion, but I think we surpassed everyone's expectations. And Mrs. Freeman, you were right about your staff. And within the CV-TEC program, I think that was true within all of our staff and throughout our region. And what we've been able to accomplish has been amazing. So our staff truly, and our staff and administrators did amazing work, served our districts and our students to the best of their ability. And in closing, just to acknowledge that everyone together really made a difference. And your support as a board was crucial in helping us accomplish that task. So we thank you and we appreciate your continued support and the role that you all play to support our mission and as we go forward. So thank you.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. It's it, I guess. So.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second.
Second. Favor? All in favor?
That. We are on to the next. Which is opinions, concerns. Board? Who's the board? Okay. Yes, the capital project update. We'll do that next.
Yes, and so Mr. St. Pierre, I'll just start it off and say we're very pleased that especially as we continue to move forward throughout this pandemic, our construction team has done a phenomenal job implementing safety protocols and making a tremendous amount of progress. During our April break, it was a busy campus, especially at the satellite campus. Many of the loose ends and the remaining punch list items at our main campus were taken care of. Mr. Bell, I'd like to turn it over to you because we're going to be ramping up not only on our satellite campus as we go forward with the rest of this year into the summer, but also in our Mineville campus as well. So things are moving forward on schedule. We are under budget, which is phenomenal. And Mr. Bell, I'm going to turn it over to you just to hit some of the highlights for us, please.
Thank you, Dr. Davey. I'll start with updating from the last meeting, beginning of March. One of the schoolhouse gave a presentation, and they had mentioned some issues we had with NICEAG. So I want to just bring that back. You know, it's been a month of time, and since then we've actually had positive news. And those issues that were presented by Schoolhouse have resolved. We've received a quote and design work from NICEAG. We actually paid the bill. We turned it around in a matter of 2 days. Paid the bill because they will not schedule us for the work until they receive the money. They have received the money as of today, and we're working on getting theirs on their schedule. What that will do is help us allow us to progress with our electrical site work as well as our normal site work, because we are moving electrical that was part of a new entrance coming out from Rupert Street. So very positive news with, on the NICEAG front. I want to make sure that was first on item up to give you an update on. Next is there are 5 change orders, 2 on the agenda, 3 on the addendum. In the mindset behind those, number 1 is replacement of the roof. It's not a replacement because we're going over the top of it, but putting a new roof on our south building and our satellite campus, where we are investing a significant amount of money on the interiors. Leaks were found during construction, and now we're going to be investing in a new roof on that. And then 3 other ones are more on the exterior of the building with framing, siding, insulation, and windows. And then movement of an electrical room from the first floor to the second floor. And all these are with remaining building contractors. They are a general contractor on this job. And this is really our last big push to get those change items in, because we are still targeting moving in September of 2021. So if there are large changes here forward, it could jeopardize us opening that building in September and moving into that building from here. So really any of those future change orders, we shouldn't see too many at that satellite campus south building. I know different story as we start construction there. Punch list items like Dr. Davey mentioned, our north building entrance has a new door installed. So we had a FRP door installed. We have some window cutouts put in. Some just final touch-up items in that north building were addressed. So a few items outstanding there. But again, we were able to take advantage of not having students. And at Pleasant main campus, we had bathroom tile installed, partitions were fixed, special ed had some doors adjusted, and HVAC work happened over the break. We're very fortunate to have that time to take advantage of some punch list items at the main campus. And lastly, our south building progress just has been amazing. I mean, if you go there in 24-hour increments, the progress has just been outstanding. And in our last meeting, we were gearing up for our second floor. We were calling our second big floor. We were pouring just over half of the second floor. It's the day after the meeting. It went very, very well. No issues at all. And as soon as that was dried and ready to move forward, they started interior framing underneath that. And underneath it is all of the office spaces, the bathrooms that flow on the whole south side of that building. And today, so we're a month later, I can tell you that all the framing is done in that area. Every bit of metal stud framing is finished. Every piece of drywall in the offices is up. They've painted it, and now they're working on painting it. So really, truly impressive, though. A 1 month period of time, if you really look at it month to month, it's unbelievable. I'll tell you that Mernane's really ramped up their presence, and they've labored up, as we call it, on the job. They have about 12 people there today. On average, we're averaging 20 contractors on-site, laborers on-site working at just that south building. So truly impressive work that's being done. And lastly, I'll just say the work that is being done, Schoolhouse commented today, Dr. Davies mentioned it in his walkthroughs as well. Jerry Brooks, our director of facilities, has mentioned it. Our team, as they see the final product, but really the workmanship through the process. Schoolhouse said it today, this is one of the best jobs they've seen done. So I gotta give kudos to Murnane as our general contractor. They're doing a significant amount of work, but they've been top notch. We have Weidman doing the electrical, we have LaPlante doing the plumbing, we have JW Danforth doing our HVAC work, our mechanical work, AW Farrell doing our roofing work. and they have just been outstanding in everything they do. And Real Construction is our site contractor. They did phenomenal work last summer. They'll be coming back this summer to continue their work. So gotta give kudos to our contractors. You can tell that they're vested. Really, that's the beautiful thing about a BOCES, and especially when you have some of those local contractors like we do. They're very vested in what we do here because it helps them down the road. You know, and you can feel that. They're also taxpayers because they may not be in, you know, the Plattsburgh area, it might be in Crown Point or Twin Lake. They're taxpayers in this project. Every person on this job, working this job pretty much is a taxpayer because we cover such a large area. It's powerful. And so I got to give kudos to the work that they're doing.
There a certain amount of outdoor work already started and site work.
Yeah, so we got a pretty good head start on it. We hit a pause because of the electrical. There's underground, high voltage wiring underground that's in the way. So we're gonna hit a snag where we had to stop anyway. But we didn't want to get too far because we want to put finish coat on that pavement when construction's done. So our target really end of August, early September. We're doing that finish coat of that site work over there. Really, that's the majority of what they have left is just asphalt work. They've got the base all prepped, ready to go.
Let's say this nice weather we got must be helping a little bit.
Yes.
Making progress in some of that.
It really helped the roofing. We were able to get our addition roof on. We did some patchwork. We did the new entrance of the south building. That roof work's been done. And now, you know, with this change order here, you know, we can jump right on more additional roofing work, but the weather's been great.
It's an unusual year. I've never seen this many dry days in a row. Normally at this time of year, you work on the roof one day, it rains, and then you get a couple more nice days, and it rains again. All right.
I'm very fortunate.
Is that it for the update on the project?
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bell.
We're ready to move on with the rest of the meeting here. Your motion to.
Motion.
Second, previous meeting minutes. Motion is second. All in favor? Motion carried. The consent agenda, the financial, A through F, going to the motion. Motion.
Second.
Second. Favor? Opposed? Carried. No old business. The consent agenda for personnel is next with A through G.
Motion.
Motion. Second. Favor? Opposed? Carried. So, Board of Cooperative.
Mr. St. Pierre, if I could just acknowledge, never mind that, we have an addendum that we'll be adding in. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
So we're going to 11A, the memorandum of agreement, CVES confession. Questions, motion? Motion.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. CTES report back. Anything of that, or just a? Okay, motion and a second. Second.
I got the second as Mr. Harmon. I did not catch the motion.
What? I
Motion.
Favor?
Aye.
Capital improvement project change orders, they approved. Motion.
Second.
Second, Mr. Lack, those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have new business manager, that's
Yes, okay, so the first one is the Champlain approval of contract or license agreement, BOCES and CHP.
Motion.
Second.
Really difficult to hear what's going on.
All right,
I'm trying louder. Okay, so we're gonna first, who's the second?
Don't have a second.
We don't have a second. Motion. A second, Malady. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
12B is the recommendation rescinding the provisional civil service appointment that was approved on March 10th.
Motion.
Motion by Mrs. Malak, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
12C is the recommendation to approve leave of absence.
Motion.
Second. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
12D is the board to approve the substitute and temporary on-call appointment.
Motion for that?
Motion.
Second.
So E, recommend and approve the capital improvement change orders.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, opposed, carried.
And then there's an additional addendum for the superintendent recommendation for the appointment of the four-year probation appointment.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
And that is all I have for what is more. Oh, there's another one right there. There's a, sorry, the list on it as well. The program agreement between BOCES and Ms. Campbell.
Motion.
Second. Aye.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed, carried.
Next one. Board approved MOA between BOCES, Champlain Valley, and United Professional Football.
Motion.
Barack, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Opposed.
Carried. One more.
And the last one is the letter of resignation.
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried. The superintendent update.
Sure, and if I could just acknowledge with the last addendum, it was actually a letter of resignation for one of our longstanding CTE teachers, Mr. Thomas Rodriguez, who has been in our service and employed since 1979 for a total of 41 years. So we would like to acknowledge Mr. Rodriguez and thank him for his service over his many years in our natural resources program in Montana. Thank you. Okay, sure. So I'll transition and say thank you, everyone, for the district superintendent's update. Just a few updates that we'll just mention. To start with, you may be aware that there have been some changes in terms of the number of state tests which are being offered at the end of the year. There are some requirements. New York State did apply for a waiver. However, that waiver was rejected, but still, so some regencies and state assessments will be offered at the end of the year. However, in CV-TEC, we are going to be extending the schedule. Normally, we end in time so that the Regents exams can be administered across the region and across the state. So there is going to be a slight change in that schedule. I believe Mrs. Friedman is through the 18th. We're going to be looking at extending our CTE programming for a couple more weeks, correct?
That is correct.
Right. So that's just something we want to make you aware of. So we'll be servicing our students and again, at an exceptional level, a little bit longer this year. Also acknowledging that our strategic plan survey is underway. It is, again, it's done through a survey electronically, and it is running until the 21st, Wednesday, the 21st of April. That is underway as part of our annual feedback perspective.
And it's completely anonymous.
It is, yes, it is completely anonymous. And we've been sending that information out. The board should receive some of those updates on your emails as well. But that's for our full part-time staff. Second, the component district updates and CVS regarding COVID-19. And we'll share with you, and you may be aware recently, and I'll just hold up a copy of the recent guidance. There was additional guidance which has recently been distributed by the New York State Health Department. It does follow and update our state guidance in terms of 3-foot versus 6-foot test spacing be for students. It does apply to students necessarily, not to staff. So there are some implications that does come to play. Some of our local districts have been making some changes already. It doesn't apply, for example, in cafeterias or large group instruction areas and so on and so forth. So there are specific logistics that need to be implemented with that. But it's a way, as we've been having a lot of success and with masking and vaccinations rolling out and so on and so forth, there is further guidance and it's in alignment with the CDC. We are working as well as our component districts with our local health departments to make sure that we implement not only the guidance, but also that we interpret it properly. So just want everyone to be aware of that. Also, there's been guidance that's come out about proms and graduations and gatherings. There are different standards with how many individuals can be inside. And they have a threshold of 100 that for if you go, then they had 200 as an outside event and even 500 if you're doing testing and checking vaccinations. So there are, the language is actually evolving and the guidance is evolving. So that additional information, and we've been sharing that with our team and our administrators as well as our superintendents. So there is going to be some evolution of the guidance where last year everything was remote or it was drive-through graduations and so on and so forth. You may see, and I believe you will see plans put in place for local school districts to maybe hold outdoor graduations where Mrs. Friedman is having some conversations with her team about, that as well. I know Mr. Slatter will as well. So we are going to try to make this work within the framework of the guidance. So we want to let you know that that's happening and that we also are working on that and we'll be working with our health departments. Lastly, you may be aware too that the vaccinations have completely opened up across the state. And the health department or the New York State Health Department has actually allowed anyone to receive a vaccination, and students up from 16 to 18 may also receive a vaccination. But that's something that has to be done with a parent present. And I believe it's only Pfizer that actually can happen. There is some emergency approval that's been put forth between 10 and 12 to 16 for Pfizer. That's in the works, and the health department's talked about that on a recent call. But right now, the vaccinations can apply between 16 and 18, but that's not something that schools are wading into, but parents can make that decision with their own children if they're between ages 16 and 18. A lot of our schools have also been working with, especially our Essex County schools, and hosting pods, which is points of distribution where they actually will open up their gyms or their facilities and hosting actually vaccination hubs for the local community. So kudos to our teams and our not only our schools, but also the health departments for that work. Just an acknowledgement too, there's been some recent guidance out about school budget and board elections. And that very much like the November election, there will be the option, we believe, to have in person, where last year everything was mandated to be mail-in. So we do believe that there still will be that option, that absentee ballot perspective and ability, but we believe it's also going to be in person, and that's what the guidance is indicating. Lastly, we do have upcoming our BOCES administrative budget vote on next Thursday. We also have BOCES board member elections, and we do have a nominee sheet that has been shared and I believe is in your packet, or it's available electronically. We have 3 BOCES candidates who are nominated. Ms. Giro, who is a current sitting BOCES board member. Mr. Harriman, who's here in person, is a sitting board member as well. And Ms. Donna Wotan, who has been nominated by the Ticonderoga Board of Education. She's a local business person and has been involved in the Thai Alliance and has been a contributor and resident of one of our region for many, many years and going back generations. So there's some strong connections there. We're pleased to share that. I want to thank our communications department for helping with that brochure, and we will be sending that out after the board meeting this evening and for our component districts to have that information going forward. So I would also like to acknowledge that we will have several at-large seats that will be available this past year. I know we do have Mrs. LaRock, who has been serving in that at-large board role. So Mrs. LaRock, we thank you for your service. Your term actually will come to a close at the time that there is that election. So I want to take the time and just acknowledge you and say thank you so much for your service and being part of our board. So if you could join me and just give it a round of applause. So with that being said, we will be taking some steps, and we have followed a process in the past for renominating individuals or individuals who do have expressed service. So we have some individuals that have expressed continuation or who have been at-large members. So we will be coming to you with a recommendation, and we've had the procedure and following education law that we work with our board president to start that process, and we put our districts on notice about our steps. So we will be bringing that information forward with you. And thank you, Mrs. Radu, for your assistance with that. Lastly, we do have the next board meeting. We do have 2 schedules remaining this year. One will be our May 12th meeting, and our hope, and I'd like to request that to our board, that we consider actually going back to an in-person meeting, if not an in-person hybrid meeting in Mineville. To allow, we can do the same thing there, what we're doing here, but it will also have a meeting in Mineville. And then June would be back here as recommended for June. This summer, we would not be able to host meetings in Mineville due to construction. So it would be really our single Southern board meeting of the year, because we've been either in person here or a hybrid here, or we were totally hybrid, or we were totally remote. So if the board is willing to accept that, Mr. St. Pierre.
Best we can.
Okay. And lastly, just there was a recent Board of Regents meetings. They've been working on, the waiver. They've also had other updates as well. So there will be some information that the board will receive in terms of my DS meeting and update that'll be forthcoming. So any questions on my district superintendent's update? Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else that needs to come forward? Maybe that you could think of? All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, Bruce made the
Say
motion.
something, I'm
Second.
sorry.
Got Linda's.
Linda, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that, I
Can't
want
hear.
to thank
Hold
Michelle.
on. We're having trouble hearing you.
Speak a little louder or try speaking louder.
Is that better?
Yes.
A little bit.
I just want to mention that Michelle Friedman gave a very wonderful presentation to my Kiwanis group and to the Customs and Border Protection's Women's History Month celebration. This was something that was postponed from last year. And she just did an excellent job, and I want to thank her very much and acknowledge the fact that she did this for us. It's great to have our members, our people talking and letting people know about things that are happening. And it was a great tribute to mothers and in her story and to mothers. And I had a lot of feedback from people saying how much they appreciated it and made them think and appreciate their parent, their mothers. So again, thank you, Michelle, for doing it. I also wanted to mention, and I hope we're doing a hybrid meeting. I had planned on being on Monday. I planned on being there, but got a call from first ARC and then the health department as my stepson. There was someone at ARC that worked with him that is COVID. So we are on quarantine, and unfortunately, this is happening to more people because of people not following the rules. So again, thank you for having the hybrid, and hoping to see you guys in person someday soon.
Thank you, Linda, for all your comments. We appreciate them. And thank you, Mrs. Friedman, for
Thank you.
what she was talking about. That's a very good thing. And we have a motion to go home, second by?
Yeah,
We're up
we have
again?
Mr.
Okay.
McCarthy first, Mr. Malise.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you, everyone.